The old man walked slowly toward the witness stand. His silver star medal gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The judge leaned forward and spoke in a cold voice. "Remove that medal before speaking in this court." The room fell into silence, but the man who stood up from the back of the room would change everything. The morning started with rain, not the gentle kind that waters gardens and fills bird baths, but the harsh, driving rain that sounds like accusations against windows. Joseph Francis Emory stood at his kitchen sink, watching the water streak down the glass, and remembered another morning with rain like this. March 15, 1971, the day everything changed. His coffee had gone cold in his hand, but he didn't notice. At 78, Joseph had learned that some memories don't fade with time. They crystallize, becoming sharper and more defined with each passing year. The faces of Danny Collins, Chen Wu, and Miguel Rodriguez stared back at him from the water-streaked window, as clear as if they were standing in his kitchen. The subpoena lay on the table behind him, its official language a stark contrast to the simplicity of what it represented. Some development company from Dallas wanted the land where he'd planted 3 oak trees. They didn't know about the blood in that soil. They didn't know about the promises made to dying men. They just saw dollar signs and opportunity. Joseph set down his coffee cup with hands that barely trembled anymore. The shaking had been worse in the early years, when the dreams were fresh and the guilt was sharp enough to cut. He walked to his bedroom, each step measured and careful. The house was too quiet now without Margaret. She'd been gone 3 years, but he still found himself turning to tell her things. Still made enough coffee for 2. The wooden box sat on his dresser where it always had, next to Margaret's picture and a folded American flag. Inside, wrapped in velvet that had once been deep blue but had faded to something closer to gray, lay the silver star. He picked it up, feeling its familiar weight. The metal was cold in his palm, but it warmed quickly. Metal has memory too, he'd learned. He hadn't worn it in public in over 10 years. The last time had been at Margaret's funeral, when she'd asked him to in her final days. "Wear it for me," she'd whispered, "so everyone knows the kind of man I married." But today felt different. Today he wasn't going to court as Joseph Emory, retiree. He was going as Staff Sergeant Emory, and he needed his brothers with him. The Millbrook County Courthouse had stood for over a century, its red brick facade a testament to permanence in a world that seemed to change too quickly. By 8:30 a.m., the parking lot was fuller than usual. Word travels fast in small towns, especially word about Joseph Emory. He was the man who fixed cars at Murphy's garage until his hands couldn't hold the tools steady anymore. The man who showed up at every funeral but never spoke. The man who planted flowers at 3 oak trees every Sunday without fail. "That's him," Sarah Chen whispered to her teenage son, as Joseph's old pickup truck pulled into the lot. "That's the man who tried to save Grandpa. I thought Grandpa died in Vietnam." "He did, but Mr. Emory tried. That's what matters, that he tried." Inside the courthouse, the usual Monday morning crowd had been supplemented by faces that didn't typically appear in civil court. Veterans from 3 wars sat scattered throughout the gallery. Some wore their VFW caps. Others came in work clothes, having taken time off from jobs they couldn't afford to miss. They came because Joseph Emory was testifying, and Joseph Emory never asked for anything. Judge Harold Whitmore sat in his chambers reviewing the case file with the kind of attention he usually reserved for high-profile criminal trials. On paper, it was simple. Pinnacle Development LLC versus Joseph F. Emory, a dispute over an easement that had existed for 34 years. The legal precedent was clear. Without written documentation, Emory's claim was weak at best. But something about the case irritated him. Perhaps it was the defendant's stubbornness in refusing legal representation. Perhaps it was the way the local newspaper had framed it as "War Hero Fights to Keep Memorial." Or perhaps, and this was the thought Whitmore pushed away, it was the knowledge that men like Emory had gone to war while men like Whitmore had gone to law school. His assistant knocked. "Judge, it's time." Whitmore stood, adjusting his robes. He'd built his reputation on running a tight courtroom, on cutting through emotion to find legal truth. Today would be no different. The law was the law, regardless of who had or hadn't served. Joseph entered the courthouse through the main entrance, something he hadn't done since jury duty in 1987. Usually he used the side door, the one near the clerk's office where he paid his property taxes every year. But today was different. Today he walked through the front door with his back straight and his eyes forward, the silver star catching the morning light. The security guard, a young man named Tyler, whose grandfather had served in Korea, stood a little straighter as Joseph approached. "Morning, Mr. Emory. Sorry, but I need to check." He stopped, seeing the medal. "Is that—" "Just doing your job, son." Joseph spread his arms for the metal detector wand. "We all have our duties." Tyler waved the wand perfunctorily, his eyes never leaving the medal. "My grandpa told me about silver stars, said they don't hand those out for showing up." "Your grandpa was right." Joseph collected his keys from the tray. "They hand them out for not leaving." The walk to courtroom 3 took forever and no time at all. Joseph noticed things he'd never seen before: the portraits of former judges lining the walls, the way the morning light made patterns on the marble floor, the smell of old wood and lemon polish that probably hadn't changed in decades. His dress shoes clicked against the floor in a rhythm that reminded him of rotor blades. He pushed open the heavy wooden doors and stepped inside. The murmur of conversation died instantly. Heads turned, eyes widened. In the third row, Master Sergeant Rita Kowalski, retired, unconsciously straightened her spine. Near the back, Vietnam veteran Thomas Bradley gripped his cane a little tighter. They saw the medal. They understood its weight. Joseph walked down the center aisle, aware of every eye on him but looking straight ahead. He took a seat in the defendant's chair, alone at the table that usually held lawyers and briefcases and legal strategies. He had none of those things. He had only the truth and a promise made to dead men. Carson Reed, lead attorney for Pinnacle Development, looked up from his papers and frowned. He was 35, Harvard Law, with a record of crushing small-town defendants under the weight of legal precedent. The medal bothered him. It introduced an element he couldn't quantify, couldn't reduce to subsections and citations. "All rise," the bailiff called, the Honorable Judge Harold Whitmore presiding. Whitmore entered with practiced authority, his robes flowing behind him like black water. He settled into his chair with the satisfaction of a man who knew his place in the world, and was comfortable with it. His eyes swept the courtroom, taking in the unusual crowd, the tension in the air, and then, inevitably, the gleam of silver on Joseph Emory's chest. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Medals. Always medals. As if wearing a piece of metal could make up for what? Whitmore had spent years in courtrooms with veterans who thought their service entitled them to special treatment. The law didn't care about your service record. The law cared about facts, documentation, precedent. "Be seated," he commanded. "We're here for case number 2023 CV445, Pinnacle Development LLC versus Joseph F. Emory. Mr. Reed, are you ready to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor." Reed stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. "The plaintiff is ready. And Mr. Emory—" Whitmore paused, making a show of looking at the empty chairs beside Joseph. "I see you've chosen to represent yourself. Again, I must advise you that—" "I understand, Your Honor." Joseph's voice was steady. "I've been advised." "Very well." Whitmore's tone suggested he thought it was anything but well. "Mr. Reed, your opening statement." Reed launched into his argument with the precision of a man who billed by the hour. He had surveys, title searches, documentation going back 50 years. He painted a picture of property rights violated, of handshake deals that had no standing in modern law, of development, progress, being held hostage by sentiment. Joseph listened without expression, his hands folded on the table. Behind him, the gallery was unusually quiet. No shuffling, no whispers, just attention, focused and intense. "And so, Your Honor," Reed concluded, "while we respect Mr. Emory's attachment to this land, the law is clear. Without written documentation of this alleged easement, Pinnacle Development has every right to restrict access and proceed with development. We ask the court to rule in our favor and issue an immediate injunction." "Thank you, Mr. Reed." Whitmore turned to Joseph. "Mr. Emory, your response?" Joseph stood slowly. The courtroom held its breath. "Your Honor, in 1989, Tom Collins gave me permission to use the access road across his property. We shook hands on it. Where I come from, that used to mean something." "Used to," Whitmore echoed. "But we deal in current law, Mr. Emory, not nostalgia. Do you have any documentation of this agreement?" "No, sir." "Any witnesses to this handshake?" "Tom Collins died in 2003, so no, sir." "Then I'm afraid, but I have this." Joseph reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn envelope. "Tom's letter to me, written a week before he died." Reed shot to his feet. "Objection, this wasn't disclosed in discovery." "Because I wasn't asked for it," Joseph replied. "You asked for legal documents. This isn't legal. It's personal." Whitmore held out his hand. "I'll review it." Joseph walked forward and handed over the envelope. The judge unfolded the letter, his expression skeptical. As he read, something flickered across his face, annoyance perhaps, or discomfort. "This letter," Whitmore said slowly, "expresses Mr. Collins' wish that you continue to have access. But wishes aren't contracts, Mr. Emory. This has no legal standing." "I understand that, Your Honor. Then why present it?" "Because you should know why he gave me access, why it mattered." Joseph's voice remained steady, but there was steel underneath. "May I explain?" Whitmore glanced at the clock. They were ahead of schedule. "Briefly, Tom Collins' younger brother Danny was my door gunner in Vietnam. First Air Cav. Danny was 19 years old, from right here in Millbrook. Wanted to be a teacher when he got home." The courtroom had gone absolutely still. Even Reed had stopped shuffling his papers. "On March 15, 1971, we were tasked with extracting Marines from a hot LZ near the Laotian border. We took heavy fire on approach. Danny was hit by shrapnel from an RPG. My co-pilot, Miguel Rodriguez, took a round through the chest. My other door gunner, Chen Wu, was killed instantly." Joseph's voice never wavered, but several people in the gallery were wiping their eyes. "I was hit 3 times, shoulder, side, and leg. The Huey was shot to pieces. Hydraulics failing. Fuel leaking. Any sane pilot would have aborted. But Danny was still conscious. Bleeding out, but conscious. And he grabbed my shoulder and said, 'Don't leave them, sir. Don't leave them like they left us.'" Whitmore shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Emory, I fail to see how this relates to—" "I'm getting there, Your Honor." For the first time, an edge entered Joseph's voice. "I flew that bird back to base on nothing but prayers and whatever angels watch over fools. Saved 8 Marines. Danny died on the way. Miguel died in the hospital. Chen was already gone." He paused, looking directly at Whitmore. "Tom Collins gave me access to plant 3 oak trees for 3 boys who didn't come home. Every Sunday for 34 years, I've tended those trees, told them about the world they died protecting, about the children they never had, the lives they never lived. That's not a legal agreement, Your Honor. It's a sacred trust." The silence that followed was profound. Reed cleared his throat to speak, but something in the atmosphere of the room stopped him. Whitmore's face had hardened. "A touching story, Mr. Emory. But stories don't supersede property law. If we allowed every emotional appeal to override legal precedent—" "Your Honor," a voice from the gallery interrupted. Everyone turned to see a woman in her 60s standing. "I'm Sarah Mills. I was Danny Collins' fiancée." Whitmore's gavel came down. "Ma'am, you cannot speak from the gallery. If you're a witness—" "I'm not a witness to any legal agreement," Sarah continued, ignoring the gavel. "But I'm a witness to what those trees mean. Every Memorial Day, Veterans Day, and March 15th, I go there. So do others. It's not just Mr. Emory's memorial. It's ours. Ma'am, sit down or I'll have you removed." More people stood. An elderly man using a walker, a middle-aged woman in nurse's scrubs, a young man in an Army ACU uniform home on leave. "Those trees represent my uncle," the soldier said. "My father," said the nurse. "My son," said the elderly man. Whitmore's gavel cracked like gunfire. "Order! I will have order, bailiff! Your Honor, please." Joseph's voice cut through the chaos. "Let me take the stand. Let me testify. Then you can rule however the law requires." The judge's face was flushed, but he nodded curtly. "Clear the gallery of anyone who cannot maintain order. Mr. Emory, take the stand." Several people sat back down, but the tension remained. Joseph walked to the witness stand with measured steps. He was halfway there when Whitmore spoke again. "Mr. Emory?" Joseph paused. "Remove that medal before taking the stand." The words fell into the courtroom like stones into still water. The ripples spread outward, shock, disbelief, anger. "I beg your pardon?" Joseph turned fully to face the judge. "You heard me. Remove the medal. This is a court of law, not a military parade. We deal in facts, not sentiment or showmanship." In the gallery, Rita Kowalski's hands clenched into fists. Thomas Bradley's knuckles went white on his cane. The young soldier started to stand again, but was pulled back by the nurse beside him. Joseph stood perfectly still for a long moment. Then slowly, his weathered hands moved to the silver star. The pin came free with a small click that echoed through the silent courtroom. He held the medal for a moment, looking at it, then placed it carefully on the witness stand's wooden ledge. "Satisfied, Your Honor?" The question was mild, but something in Joseph's eyes made Whitmore look away. "Proceed, Mr. Reed." Reed approached the witness stand like a man walking through a minefield. The atmosphere had changed. What should have been a simple property dispute had become something else, something dangerous. State your name for the record. Joseph Francis Emory. Mr. Emory, you claim to have an easement across my client's property, is that correct? I have used the access road for 34 years with permission. Permission from someone who's been dead for 20 years? Yes. And you have no written proof of this permission? I have my word. Tom Collins had his. That was enough. Reed smiled thinly. I'm sure it was. Tell me, Mr. Emory, what makes your word more valuable than my client's property rights? Joseph looked at him for a long moment. Nothing, I suppose, in this room anyway. What does that mean? It means I understand that the law values paper over promises, contracts over character. I understand that perfectly. Then you understand why, but understanding and accepting are two different things, Mr. Reed. Reed's smile faltered. Mr. Emory, you're aware that Pinnacle Development has offered to relocate your memorial to another location? I am. And you refused? I did. Why? Joseph's gaze moved from Reed to the metal on the ledge, then back. Would you ask a widow to dig up her husband and move him because someone wanted to build condos on the cemetery? That's not the same, isn't it? Joseph's voice remained calm, but there was iron underneath. Those trees grow in soil mixed with blood. Not literally, Danny Chen and Miguel are buried elsewhere. But that land holds their memory. You can't relocate memory, Mr. Reed. You can't transplant a promise. Your Honor, Reed appealed to Whitmore. The witness is being non-responsive. Mr. Emory, Whitmore's voice was sharp. Please confine yourself to answering the questions asked. I am answering, Your Honor. Mr. Reed asked why I refused to relocate. I'm explaining. You're grandstanding. For the first time, Joseph's composure cracked slightly. Grandstanding? I sat in this chair without a lawyer, without family, without anyone but the ghosts of men who trusted me. I removed my medal because you demanded it. I've answered every question asked. If that's grandstanding, then I don't understand the word. Your understanding is not required, Whitmore snapped. Only your compliance. The tension ratcheted higher. In the back of the room, unnoticed by most, a figure in full military dress uniform stood up. He'd entered during Reed's opening statement, taking a seat in the last row where he could observe without being observed. Now, as the judge's disrespect reached its peak, Colonel Marcus Thompson could remain silent no longer. Your Honor, his voice carried the authority of command. May I speak? Every head turned. Whitmore, caught mid-sentence, fumbled with his glasses. Who are you? This is a closed proceeding. Colonel Marcus Thompson, 3rd Battalion, 75th Rangers, retired. He stepped into the aisle with military precision. I'm here because what's happening in this courtroom goes beyond property law. Colonel, you have no standing in this case. Sit down or... I'll stand, thank you. Thompson's voice never rose, but it filled the room. Just as every veteran in this room will stand when they see one of their own stripped of dignity by someone who's never worn the uniform. As if on cue, veterans throughout the gallery began to rise. Not all at once, not coordinated, but steadily. Rita Kowalski stood first, her back ramrod straight despite her 70 years. Thomas Bradley pushed himself up with his cane. The young soldier in ACUs stood at attention. This is intimidation, Whitmore sputtered. No, Your Honor. This is respect. Thompson had moved forward now, his Medal of Honor visible on his chest. Something you showed you lack when you ordered a decorated veteran to remove his silver star. How dare you? I dare because I earned the right. Thompson's voice cut through Whitmore's bluster. Just as Joseph Emory earned the right to wear that medal anywhere he chooses. Do you know what a silver star represents, Your Honor? I don't need a lecture on gallantry in action, valor in the face of the enemy. The Silver Star is awarded for actions that go above and beyond the call of duty, but fall short of warranting the Distinguished Service Cross. Thompson recited the words like scripture. Joseph Emory earned his by flying a crippled helicopter through enemy fire to save Marines he'd never met, with his crew dead or dying around him. He turned to address the room. Every person wearing or who has worn the uniform understands what that medal represents. It's not jewelry. It's not costume. It's a physical manifestation of the moment when a person chose others' lives over their own. Bailiff! Whitmore's voice was high, strained. Clear this man from... I knew Danny Collins. Thompson's words stopped Whitmore cold. Not personally. But I knew his story because my grandfather was one of the Marines Joseph Emory saved that day. Lance Corporal David Thompson. Without Joseph's actions, I wouldn't exist. My children wouldn't exist. The hundreds of students my grandfather taught wouldn't have had him as a teacher. The courtroom was transfixed. Even Reed seemed frozen, his legal arguments forgotten in the face of something larger. Thompson walked to the witness stand where Joseph sat, tears now flowing freely down the old man's weathered face. You asked him to remove his medal, Your Honor, but you can't remove what it represents. You can't diminish the sacrifice by hiding the symbol. He picked up the silver star from the ledge, handling it with the reverence it deserved. Mr. Emory, may I? Joseph nodded, unable to speak. With military precision, Thompson pinned the medal back on Joseph's blazer. This stays on. In this court, in any court, anywhere you choose to go. Because you earned it with blood and grief and courage that most of us can only imagine. The applause started slowly, one person clapping, then another, then the entire gallery erupting. Whitmore's gavel cracked repeatedly, but it was like trying to stop a tide. Order, order, I'll clear this courtroom. Your Honor. The voice came from an unexpected source. Carson Reed was standing, his face thoughtful. May I have a moment to confer with my clients? What? Yes, fine, 5 minutes. Reed pulled out his phone and stepped away. The gallery slowly settled, but the veterans remained standing. Thompson stayed by Joseph's side, a silent sentinel. When Reed returned, his entire demeanor had changed. Your Honor, Pinnacle Development wishes to withdraw its complaint. What? Whitmore's voice cracked. On what grounds? On the grounds that some things transcend property law. Reed looked at Joseph. My clients have decided to deed the memorial grove to Mr. Emory in perpetuity, along with permanent access rights. Furthermore, they'll establish a maintenance fund to ensure its upkeep. The courtroom erupted again. This time Whitmore didn't even try to restore order. He sat behind his bench looking smaller than his robes, watching his authority evaporate. Motion to dismiss is granted, he managed, then fled to his chambers. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Videos of the confrontation, captured on phones despite the supposed prohibition, spread across social media within hours. Veterans organizations picked up the story. National news outlets that usually ignored such events found themselves compelled to cover it. By that evening, Judge Harold Whitmore had received thousands of emails. The State Judicial Review Board announced an immediate investigation. 3 senators called for his resignation. His carefully constructed career began to crumble like a dam with too many cracks. But in Millbrook, Joseph Emory sat in his kitchen looking at the photographs on his table. The old one from Vietnam, faded and creased, and a new one taken on the courthouse steps, showing him surrounded by veterans, his silver star prominent on his chest, Colonel Thompson at his side. We did it, boys, he whispered to the faces of the dead. We held the line. The next Sunday, the memorial grove was full of people. Veterans and their families, townspeople, even some folks from neighboring states who'd heard the story. They helped Joseph tend the 3 oak trees, now protected forever. Carson Reed was there too, having driven down from Dallas. He approached Joseph hesitantly. Mr. Emory, I wanted to apologize. I was so focused on winning that I forgot about what was right. Joseph studied him, then extended his hand. Takes courage to admit when you're wrong, son. That's important too. As the sun filtered through the oak leaves, someone had installed a new plaque. It read, In memory of SP4 Danny Collins, SGT Chen Wu, and W01 Miguel Rodriguez, and in honor of SSG Joseph Emory, who brought them home. Don't leave them. March 15, 1971, Judge Harold Whitmore resigned 3 days later. His letter was brief, citing personal reasons and time for reflection. He never returned to the courthouse. Some say he moved to Arizona. Others heard he was teaching at a community college. But everyone agreed on one thing. He learned too late that respect isn't given automatically with a title. It's earned through understanding the weight others carry. The courthouse instituted new policies on military cultural awareness. A photograph now hangs in the main hallway. Joseph Emory, in his blue blazer, silver star gleaming, standing in the witness box with Colonel Thompson beside him. Below it, a simple inscription. Honor recognizes honor, November 15, 2023. Every Veterans Day now, that courtroom hosts a special ceremony. Veterans speak to law students and young lawyers about service, sacrifice, and the weight of memory. They tell the story of the day when a judge's arrogance met a veteran's dignity, and dignity won. Joseph Emory still visits the grove every Sunday. He's often not alone now. Others come to help tend the trees, to share stories, to remember. He still wears Margaret's favorite blue blazer. And yes, he still wears the silver star, not for show, but for Danny, Chen, and Miguel. For all the men and women who understand that some promises transcend death, some honors transcend law, and some stands must be taken simply because they're right. The medal stays on. It always will. Because in a small courthouse in Arkansas, people learn that while justice may be blind, honor sees everything, every sacrifice, every loss, every moment when ordinary people do extraordinary things. And honor, true honor, never forgets. The rain had stopped by the time Joseph got home that day. The sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across his yard. He stood for a moment on his porch, looking at the rainbow forming in the distance, and thought about Danny Collins's last words. Don't leave them. He never had. He never would. And now, thanks to a colonel who understood, and a community that remembered, he never had to explain why that mattered more than any law ever written. Some battles, Joseph reflected, are won not with weapons or words, but with the simple act of standing up. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything.